I decided to throw together a presentation on an iPad app that we've been working on for a bit for one of our clients. And I wanted to talk about like how the origins of the app, how we worked through it, some of the decisions that were made, and a little, not really a deep dive, but a few details on a couple of the pieces of it. So the challenges that we had to face with this was that this company has technicians that go out and install, service, or pick up equipment from people all across the state. And they have multiple technicians assigned to multiple stops each day. They had a paper-based process, which was essentially for each technician, they had a piece of paper that had a list of the stops, like the person's name, their address, the account number of the equipment, and a little line for notes underneath each one. And they took that and then like a stack of, they call it a sub-report. So it has client information and then all of the note history that anytime the customer service reps had called about that client, called their care managers, called the house and left a message. So you have that communication history in there. And then they also had stuff like their responder information, medications, allergies, things like that, because what they have is the equipment that they deal with is home alert kind of stuff, phone can't get out, that kind of, it'll call emergency services for you, type of equipment. That was their paper-based process. So they had all this, they just give a stack of paper or email them a bunch of PDFs, and they would print those out and take them on the road with them. They wanted to get away from that paper-based process. There was no guaranteed connection, so we needed an offline system. And they wanted the technician's notes and the client data updates, which were things like, oh no, that's the wrong phone number. Change that phone number to this. I don't want you to have this as this is not a good emergency person for me anymore. Scratch them out and put in this new information. I no longer have, or I don't have this medical condition, or I've added 2 more medical conditions to my list. So things like that they wanted that to be gathered and added back into their big system after the review. And then the last one was to gather some, what we were calling service activity records for performance reviews. So these were things that, like in the app, to know that they called the office. Did the tech do A, B, and C? So to get some kind of KPIs to gather for the managers to review, make sure people were doing the things they're supposed to do for technician reviews. We love wireframing. We have a lot of fun creating wireframes for all of the new stuff that we work on. So we created a blueprint for the app. We've been working with the client for a while before we started this, right? Because we had built onto we have a big system within their main system called Stella. And we had been working with their processes for quite a while. So we knew the processes pretty well. We used Balsamic to create a wireframe to get feedback from them, and then the client use case review to walk them through. They had a pretty good idea of what they wanted because they'd been talking about it for a while. It was one of their things where they're like, we really want to, one of their wish list items was, we really want to get iPads into these technicians' hands. We need them to have something on the road to help gather this information. So we stayed pretty close to the original drawings. And the next bunch of slides are going to be the original, which are V2 drawings. We had a V1, of course, sent them to them. They looked at it and went, oh, wait a minute, hold on. Changed a bunch of stuff up. But they had a very clear idea of what they wanted the technicians to have. So once they had a working version on the iPad, a couple more things changed, of course. And then once the techs got a hold of it, even more stuff. They were like, yeah, you know what? This is a terrible idea. This doesn't work. Change this, change this, change this. A lot of it was, put things from the right to the left, because where our eyes move, where we need to see the data. So this is our side-by-side here. So this first one is their main menu. We say hello to the tech, the daily tech report. We'll talk a little bit more about what that but that's essentially all of their stops for the day. The button to call Star Alert, I think they use an app called UC Reach, I think is what it's called. And so it's a way to, they're using the device or patching through like their cell phone, and it shows their business number so that they aren't getting some random call from some guy in a van. It comes in as their main business number. So that's programmed there to just reach out to UC Reach to make the call. On our version, we added a couple more bells and whistles. We have our, this was like old data, I'm not test here, but if they're a day late, however, it has whatever the day is, it does tell them that they have to sync. There's notes. This is enabled so that the managers can add a note on their side when they create the iPad bundle, and that will come down, and then the tech can also put a note in there that can get sent back up to management. There's inventory, which we'll see coming up. This log out button here allows an admin or me to get in and do some administrative side stuff. This is where there's a manual way to assign a tech to the app, and where the phone numbers are stored for the system, and a way to like delete all of the data on the iPad to see when the data on each table was last updated, things like that. This next slide is the daily tech report, so that list of stops. So the original design, pretty similar. We have our home button. We have some date information at the top. Stop time, action, account number. We have all that over here. And then on the far right, there we go. So we have these, instead of this yes, no, we decided to change that to a graphic. So I've got the gray stars while the stops are confirmed. When they become complete, it becomes a gold star. If they become rescheduled, they become little red kind of calendar icons. And then it sorts so that all of the things that are not complete are at the top, so that they can kind of roll through and keep moving. At the bottom here, we had a view inventory. So we want to do that. We also have that here. And then they wanted a button for sub-reports, and the sub-reports are those things that, like I said, they're the kind of communication history that they have with the customer. Because what they said was, well, what I normally do in the morning before I do anything is I go through all those papers. I read through all the notes so that if something catches my eye, or I know, oh, this person I might have to call 3 times, or I might have to call the sister, I might have to call the cousin. They get a sense of their workload for that. The mapping, this does navigation for the stops, so they can switch between Google Maps or Apple Maps. And this is the shortcut button to call their call center. So this next one is like an appointment detail, the service call detail. And this is where we did move some stuff around. We have the address was on the left originally and to the right. So some little minor changes. This piece at the top here, that's a web viewer that shows the sub-report information. They have this like this service note, something that any tech would need to know when they're on the service call. And then the note history is like all these calls, right? We called, they called, if people left messages and whatnot. This section here with the check boxes, this is as I was talking about earlier, they want to make sure that the tech, what did they do? Did they leave a message? Did they, was it answered, confirmed? This one, this no home visit resolved over the phone, was one that came up after the second or third version that they were using, and they're like, you know what, we have to add something in here because this happens all the time. And so it's kind of a special situation, so they wanted that to be added in there. Calling the office, something that's important, because if they don't call the office, then they get a black mark on them, because that's just a necessity. The rescheduling went from being on this front page to a second tab, just because it's, how things get real busy on a layout when you're trying to jam everything in. So we had to spread some things out a little bit. I didn't grab screenshots of the reschedule. The entry photos was another way to quickly, they wanted to have somewhere where you can get the front door, right? We left a note on the front door that said, we were here and we missed you, sorry we missed you note. And they want the tech to take a picture of that so that they also know that they were at their front door, and not just saying that they were there. So that's another check. This one is showing that sub-report. So again, pretty simple, pretty close to what they wanted. Have all the notes here, and then the tech is required to put a note in before they can mark the service call complete, which is why it's great. And then we also have a little thing in here that, like, if they start, they have to have, unless it's a certain type of call, they have to have a minimum of 50, characters in there in order for it to allow them to do it. This part with the contract review. So on this side, it says contract review. This side is the appointment review equipment side. Again, pretty similar. We've got the service call type. There's a way to change out the equipment. Again, they wanted to move some of the things over, making the call yes, no more prominent. And then again, we broke up some of the requirements here at the bottom. So the EQ checklist, they had to have, one of the guys was like, we absolutely have to have a button there. They have to say that it tested okay, and they didn't want them to have to type it out. Oh, it tested okay. So having this is just, tap, check. The equipment checklists are things like, did you say, and you will see some more later on. Did you tell them about the power supply? Things like that, like to make sure that they go through the paces for, what a service call needs to include. The notes, we moved to another tab, and the photos are also on another tab because a client could opt out of photos, or the tech can determine that it's not necessary. So to have to require a photo all the time, which is another consideration, the management, they were like, oh, we want to make sure that everybody, make sure they take a picture all the time, make sure that they do this, make sure that they do that, make sure that they do this other thing. And then the techs are like, we can't, it's going to take up too much time. And even the management said that afterwards. They were like, we thought about it, and we want to make it as easy as possible for the techs to get in and out, and put as minimum information in as they need to get done. Otherwise, they're never going to use it, because you have that barrier to this new process. And so we were, had to wrestle with that to get what you need, but not make it so heavy-handed that people were like, I'm not using that thing. So the little alert indicators on here are, so, if you don't say that the equipment tested okay, that will stay there. If you don't add a note, that'll stay there. If you don't add a photo, or don't say that they were refused, or that they were not necessary. So they're just little visual alerts for the tech. The client information was kind of the big part of all of this. When they have a new customer, they have some information about them, and then they have to build the customer profile. And when they build the customer profile, again, they get some things, but maybe not everything. And so when the tech goes into the home, they have an opportunity and a responsibility to double check that information, to say, please look at this, make sure we have everything right. You don't want to have the wrong phone number on something where we're going to call emergency services. We try to get in touch with you before they come and break your door down. So they have to go over each piece of information that they have. And this is the piece that we're going to dive into a little later, like how we gathered it from the main system and decided to put it into the app, and then how we implemented the display and the editing, that kind of thing. But and again, you see here, we do not have a bunch of big edit buttons on each line. It's broken down per piece of information, which I think is a lot cleaner, but it also allows you have to, one of the things that's probably a little bit of pain for people is that they have to edit one thing at a time, but it also makes it very clean in how we deal with the data. And so far, no one's complained about it. So signature page for the, the end is standard, name, address, some equipment details, the checkboxes agreeing to some of their rules, box for signature, printed name, button to email contract. Inventory list, again, very similar. What we ended up adding as we went, just, as we've all learned, you're looking at it going, man, you can't see it. This needs to be organized in some fashion that makes sense. And the most important thing I thought for the tech was, where is it and what needs to happen to it? So, anything that needs service is here, picking up. And then they asked that, we have a way for them to know that they pulled some of it. So anything that's not in their hands is already at the customer's house. They just have to grab here. But then if it's in stock, they wanted to make sure that somebody's down there picking stuff up that's in their bin that they can take with them. So we added a full stock functionality there. The technician checklist, like we were talking about before, this is did you do all of this stuff? So check boxes for that you explained the microphone, talked about the battery, that you did the leave behinds, leave the contract, leave your business card, leave the magnet, stuff like that. And we have the photo gallery. So the iPads have a place where you can take pictures of, whatever. Usually it's going to be, they want one picture of the install, right? So that when they call and say, it's not working, that the customer service rep can look at a photo and say, oh, is it still on your bedside table? Is it still plugged in? Check, blah, 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 So they get a sense, a little more information. Although I hear that a lot of times, as soon as they install it, they walk out the door and the people unplug it and move it somewhere else. And then call 20 minutes later and say, I don't know why it doesn't work. They don't touch it. So, but again, we stayed very close to the reference. So how did we build it? There's 1,000 ways to do everything, right? Yes, but only 4 good. So we thought about this quite a bit, like we're supposed to for everything. So the original system, the big system that this was coming off of, Stella, at the time had 89 tables, and as a multi-file solution, we do separation models. So we had interface, we have data, we have an import export, and we have the log file. All right, so we have a bunch of stuff talking to each other. So the data was coming from a whole bunch of places, and like we said earlier, the system had to be offline, so we couldn't just build an interface that would go connect to Stella and talk to it and go get all of those things. We had to consolidate, condense, and bring that important information down into a new file. So we created Stella Mobile, and it currently has 17 tables, and it's a single file. So what we created over here, so the green section here, those are the regular data that's synced. So the daily tech report, which is basically, the date. And there's like I grab system log information for connection log if they don't have a connection. And the information about equipment kind of gets gathered together, like the inventory information gets gathered into the daily tech report and pushed out. A service call is the individual service call. SCEQ checklist is the checkboxes for all of the equipment for that service call. Did they do those things? A table for images, a table for that inventory, and a table for messages, which they really aren't using, but might at some point, where they want to be able to create a message in Stella, have the iPads pick them up, and kind of interact with them, have it pop up as a notification. The blue section is master data, which will be refreshed. Still working on that piece where, like right now, I just preload the app with the master equipment list. The equipment checklist is that master list of all those checkbox items. And then the checklist join is the list of IDs and the type. So like, because a checklist item can be for a specific piece of equipment, for an entire equipment category, or belong to everything. So that's tracking that. So that's all living on the iPad. Value list items is a consolidation of all of their, so every value list that exists in Stella, we get all of the values for that and the name of the value list, and that is brought down, as well as we are using a value list options table in Stella so that they can create and manage their own value list that uses the virtual value list technique to pull those down. So both their hard-coded value lists and their value list options records all get kind of glommed together and then put in here so that anytime it's updated on either side, all those values are going to exist in the same, on the iPad as well. So that's what these are. Settings, we all know settings, one record, that's where the phone numbers and stuff are, where the logo is. Then we've got our utility tables, syslog, again, that's mostly grabbing connection information, globals, virtual value lists, which if people aren't familiar with the virtual value list, that is a way to, on the fly, on field enter, to create a value list just using an execute, or you could hard code it in there, but it grabs a bunch of values and drops it into a value list when you click on it. VL, which is short for virtual list, which I love using, it's everywhere. And then these two down here, what's my latency and this IUD spinner for borders. Those are two add-ons that we put in to solve a couple problems we had. The latency was just, I wanted to have something where he checks out in the field, he may or may not have a connection. So before he tries to sync, the what's my latency will go check. You can use the settings that are in there to have it check up to 4 different, well, I guess you could modify it to have as many as you want, but it'll check the latency by checking up to 4 different connections. So it could do Apple, it could do Google, it could do, whatever endpoint you want to get the latency speed. And then based on that average to say, oh, you've got a good enough connection to actually try this push, or you don't have a good enough connection, I'm going to stop it. So that they're not sitting there stuck trying, and the iPad's not trying to try to get information up or down from the server. And then the spinner for borders is because you can't just plop an animated GIF into a web viewer on the iPad and have it do anything. So this spinner for borders was a very nice add-on that allowed you to, it works on the iPad to get you a little animated thing. It's just like we have it set up as like a little multicolored circle. So that was our way to have a progress bar when downloading information. So that's what we ended up with. So the humble service call from Stella. So we use anchor buoys. You can see all of our lovely relationships here. So we aren't actually pulling data from all of these tables, but we are pulling from a bunch of them, but we are starting from service. A lot of the data is coming off of this SRES, which is our resident table. And then actually we go off to a different resident tog and get the responder information, address information, phone numbers, all that kind of stuff from there. But this is just to give you an idea of how much stuff is in Stella that we are kind of working with, because we have some information from the service call, some from the resident, some from the contract. We've got stock, which is coming through the contract. That's what the account numbers are coming from, and then the equipment as well. So we're pulling from a bunch of this stuff. And here's what the service call detail looks like in Stella. Again, not a whole lot from here. There's pickup type if there's any extra detail on the issue. This note here is the one that will show up at the top of the service call. And this is the one, like the one that we saw before. It was like, oh, call him on the way so he could tie up the dog. That's extremely important information for the tech. But there's not a whole lot in here. So where they start in creating the, what I call a bundle for each daily tech report per technician, is this service call list. And so they have a confirmed calls section of the service calls. So what this is a set of confirmed stops that are assigned to a technician on a particular day. That's our DTR, daily tech report. Managers prep the stop order. We have a thing, they used to use MapQuest, and then that completely broke in the last couple of months. I had built a thing that goes, grabs all the Latin and throws it up into, Location IQ API. And they actually have a route planning that you can use in there. So so they use that to pre-plan their route. And so they get this stop order correct, and then they can click this little package button up here, and it will bundle all the stops for that day into the mobile DTR. So these are the new tables that we created to support the mobile structure in Stella, the big app. So we've got a table to hold the app for distribution. We have the DTR, so that's the date plus technician. We've got the images that are going to be signatures as well as installs of equipment. We have an inbox, which I'm using as, that's where the images come in as base64 text. So they go into the inbox first and be processed. The messages, like I said, 0 records, nobody's using that yet. And then we've got service call. And that has the bulk of the information. And then here's our little tog for the mobile DTR, and it is nice and small. Creation workflow. I just put this in here because I spent time making it for the client, and like only they got to see it, so I just wanted to put it somewhere else. So, and I like making diagrams too. Anybody, from the computer creates a DTR. It goes up into that mobile DTR table, and then the iPads can individually pop up. They check out the bundle, and then at the end of the day or the next morning, because some of them like to do it, they check in and then download the next one. The timestamps are popped up so they'll know when it was downloaded, and then also when it was checked in the next day if they're going to check in on that. The connection workflow. In each mobile app, the thing that it stores that it needs to grab the DTR, all it needs is really the technician's UID, because it uses the current date and the technician's UID, and that's all it asks for from the server to get that daily tech report. So the iPad connects, gets the DTR local, the download timestamp gets logged onto the server. So once it successfully downloads, it pops up again and says set that timestamp. And then it is local only. And then we have this nice little process here. They make their updates when they change the status of any of the service calls, if one's complete or if it needs gets set to reschedule, that will update to the server right away. That way, like in the middle of the day, someone can check and see how their progress is going. If they don't have any connection at all, then you wouldn't be able to see that progress. But otherwise, you can see the stops. We'll see that in a couple minutes. And then at the end of the day, they can look through their stops. I don't think they actually do much looking through. They're just like, oh, I'm done with everything. And they hit the sync button, and it just, pushes it all up to the server. So it rebundles some of the data locally. It goes through and builds checklist items out of those. Did they call? Did they leave a message? Those are stored as yes, no's. And then there's that syslog information and any equipment information, inventory updates. That gets bundled into the DTR record. The iPad connects, uploads the DTR, gets a response, and then uploads all of the service calls in a loop. And then also does the images. So signatures go up with service call information here. And then all of the images go up at the end of the day. So another thing, I didn't want people sitting there waiting at the end, like if they took 5 pictures and then they had a bad connection, or it was, not slow anybody down. So once those bundles are created, they are in this mobile daily tech report list. So we have our text and we have the bundles, and this row, this button bar here can show us that this first one's still confirmed. Maybe they didn't have a connection when they went and did that one. The complete, reschedule, complete. So you get a sense of their progress at any given time. If you click this button to the right, it opens up the individual stops. So they can also see that. Again, we have the statuses broken out and his times. So he finished that one at 10:38, 11:33, 11:58. So he was moving and shaking there. As I said before, if they're completed or rescheduled in the field, status update, service call data is uploaded if the connection is available. There was one guy who everywhere he went all day long never had a connection, and I think his iPad was screwed up. So he would just do everything local, and then at the end of the day, push it all up, and everything went fine. So we used JSON to consolidate the data. So we knew that we needed an easy way to compare the data additions and changes after the service call and client data is uploaded to Stella. So in thinking about this, how I did it was that I created 2 fields for each kind of section of data values. One of them would be preloaded with the data from Stella, and the other one would be empty, waiting for data from the iPad, right? These are the fields for the mobile service call. And we're going to talk about the JSON client and JSON client edit. So JSON client holds all the data related to the customer. So it'll have, first name is the key, name is the value, and all of that in this big giant value in the JSON client field. And then JSON client edit is empty. So when we pull down data from the server, we get everything, the original data, and then waiting for the edit. We build the JSON data, special layouts, or specific layouts, I should say, to build the data. I have kind of a note over here, layouts using the JSON bundling script. You can add new fields to this, so later on in life, when they say, you know what, let's put this and this and this in there too, we can just add the fields to this layout, change the tab order, make sure the object names are defined well, and they will just get roped into it. So the first field is start, the first housekeeping field at the bottom is named end, and we just do go to field next to build all of these, and we use get active layout object name to build the key and get active field contents to build the value. So the field object names are very important. And that comes into play in building the value, the virtual lists later for display of reports. And here's our little script snippet to build the client JSON. Every time I do anything with the script, I start like hard coding something. And then like I hard code something like 3 times. I'm like, how can I loop this? And so you see loops a lot. And what I try to do. So, like I said earlier, we went from that service call table to SRES, and we jumped over to this other resident main table. This I have iPad JSON client, iPad JSON contract, iPad JSON CLI, so for all of these chunks of information. So we go to this new window, go to the field, and just start throwing the keys and values into this JSON. And then at the end of this script, that $client detail underscore JSON gets dropped into that JSON underscore client field. Okay, in the app, the screen that shows the client data is a virtual list. So the script is called load client info BL. We use virtual list technique to create an organized and formatted interface. So this is where we have a lot of hard-coded information. So over here on the right, it says provider information. That's a hard-coded header. And then we have provider was a key, UPMC is a value in the JSON. I have hard-coded header for address. Grab all the address fields. So that's a very long script. And each line of the virtual list has a type so that you can determine whether or not it's got the blue background with the white text as a header, or if it shows like this. You can see in the layout here that there's a whole bunch of stuff stacked on top of each other. And we're using, hide object when. So this star is if it's been updated, the cameras, if this piece of information is type image, so things like that. You can see this remove, we'll see that remove button later in these little arrows. So there's a bunch of stuff going on in this layout. To edit the client data in the app, tapping a row of type data is going to load the value, which was that column 5, I think. So it was column 3 is the key, and column 5 is the value, and column 4 is probably the data. I don't know, but all of them are like with the type. So it loads those values into a global field for editing in new card windows. I have a different card window for each type of predetermined data, right? So there's standard text, there's images, value list, if it's a value list based key, checkbox set, and multi-line. So depending on that type, these are all separate. I wasn't going to try. At one point, I thought, I'll just try to put all of those into one card window. And then I said, you know what? No. Because you make these buttons 2 times and say, why can't I consolidate? So this would be the one for the images. This language, because it knows that it's a value list based saying it knows which value list to use, and I'm using the virtual value list here to drop onto this global field what those values are stored in the virtual value list table. And then this one for the multi-line, because this is where they do a lot of editing, where they're adding or removing medical conditions and things like that, and allergies, because those are like the two most important things for them to have in their information. Also on that layout, when we're looking at responders, because responders have a whole bunch of stuff, like, there's the relationship name, phone one type, phone two type, phone three, email one, email two, instead of having that be a mile long for them to look through, we have a tap to expand in that virtual list. Ways to add a new responder, and then all of these have a verify at the end. Because another one of the ideas they had, there used to be another button on these for a checkbox. Because management said, we want them to verify all the data. We want to know that all the data was verified. They said, so you want a checkbox next to everything that's verified? Yes. And later they said, no, take that away. That nobody wants to do that. So we consolidated it by, making these buttons at the bottom of each section. Just tapping that's going to allow you to move on to the next one. So you can't go onto the signature page unless all of these sections have been verified with a simple tap. So then at the end of the day, our sync uses the FileMaker Data API to send updated mobile service call field and image data in two separate loops. So if the service calls aren't already pushed up, because since when they mark them as completed or they mark them as rescheduled, at that moment, it checks for a connection. If there is one, it grabs everything and sends it up. But then at the end of the day, it has to get the DTR information. That would be the connection syslogs, the inventory statuses or notes, anything in there. It bundles all of those into a couple different fields and then pops that information up. Any service calls that are not complete will get grabbed at that point, looped through and pushed up. And then the images are sent in a separate loop. So the images are sent as raw base 64 to the inbox table. Then after the image sync loop runs, we use the data API to run a script in Stella to process the image records, or to create the image records from the inbox and decode the base 64. Once that's all up there, they have a comparison report that they can run. If you remember back, the window that had the stops in it, or said confirmed, completed, rescheduled, there was a little button on the right, like a little page. If you click that, it loads all the information from the service call up into this. This is another virtual list report. So we've got, that service checklist here, no answer left message, no answer confirmed, yes. So we're grabbing that, called LSM, yes, office, no, photos not necessary. So we grab all this information and drop these into the service activity. So like I said earlier, this was one of the things for the performance reviews. They can grab these and they know that people are marking them yes, no. They can tell people or ask them about the photos, like, why is every service call? You say that they're not required, they're not necessary. We need something. So that's some information they can go on. If the contract was emailed, sub-report note that they're required to add is in there. If there's equipment update changes, that would list out here. And because this is a virtual list, I have, we can do 2 columns here and then 3 columns here. And as this says over here on the left, only new or changed values are displayed for this section here. So from equipment updates down, if there's something in that JSON client edit field, that it goes and looks. It says, is JSON client edit empty? If it is, it just says no changes and doesn't go. If it isn't, it says, okay, give me the first value. And it just loops through and gets the key, grabs that key, grabs the original value from JSON client, grabs the new value from JSON client edit, and then lays them out. So that's why I have the field name, which is the key, the original value, latex, new value is latex, Mobic, tramadol, whatever those are. So that the tech, or not the tech, the reviewer has some information to go on. You see there was no data in it. They updated it to Chalfont. Sometimes they'll do things like, instead of living room, it'll say living room drawer under window or something, more detail. But, this is good information. This person has the person across the hall has a key. So somebody, a manager or somebody else in the tech department reviews these. And then there's a button, usually up here in the corner, that they can hit that will move this data over into Stella, right? And so it'll put the signature into the current contract. It links the photos to they have like an equipment location field in the customer profile, so that photo will be accessible there. It will use, on this screen, it will put all of the data that is new and updated into the same fields that it came from originally. So we're using the same layout that was used to build the data to update it. So we just go back, all the keys are the same. So we just go back and grab the new value, go to that field, put it in, and it just updates nicely. And that's why those object names are like super important. So, and then the last thing that I want to talk about is how we're doing the app distribution. The app is distributed from inside Stella, so it's just sitting in a container here. Managers or admins can select multiple technicians to receive the file via email if they don't have, if somebody doesn't have an email account in here, or if they're not a real person, they have these, I don't know why they created technicians. I think it's just to assign locations for some equipment. If you don't have an email, you can't be selected. And then the distribution process works in two different steps. So Stella generates a config file that holds the SMTP information from settings in Stella, Big Stella, and the selected technician data. So if you can see down here on the right, it is currently using my email information as for the SMTP. And then this is there's one tech that was selected. If there were 10 techs, it would be 10 lines. First piece of information is their UID, then their name, then their email address. So it creates the config file, and then it exports the app with a specific name. Then opens that app locally. So inside the script, it opens that external file. Then the startup script in the app says, oh, if my name is Stella Mobile Dist, it stops kind of what it's doing, looks for the config file, and then it generates copies of itself and changes the stored technician ID. So it grabs each one, changes the settings, saves a copy of itself into a directory that has the text name in it, and then it attempts to email the text email, and it goes on to the next one. If it has any problem sending emails, it'll show a dialog box saying, there were issues sending emails. You may want to send manually. And if you say, okay, Big Stella deletes the config file and deletes the Stella Mobile Dist, that distribution file, and leaves you with a directory that has each file in each text folder, right? Because the main file has the version number in it. It'll say Stella Mobile 11.2.22. So if you say no, then Big Stella just wipes out that mobile app dist folder. So it's a pretty clean process to create and send the app. So far it's working.
Is there one file per visit to the customer, or is this one big file per technician? Per technician.
Right, well, per iPad. Yeah, so
and it's
so
preloaded with all the jobs and visits.
No, it gets all the jobs when it syncs. So they have, when they get the file, it doesn't have anything in it. It just has their tech ID and the preloaded equipment information, like equipment checklists, all that kind of stuff. And then in the morning, it'll say at the top, there is no DTR on this device. So they hit the sync button. It goes, it gets the DTR, gets all the service calls, brings them down, unbundles them locally, and then they do their work throughout the day. At the end of the day, they sync to pop it back up.
That's brilliant.
So far, it's been working well. So they hired a good guy to deal with this, and he's done a great job working it. Not so much putting it through its paces, but being very clear about when something doesn't go wrong. Because he's a tech. He goes out, and then he also comes back, and he's been in charge of processing So this whole time that we've been debugging, like the compare report, when he's like, oh, well, I did it and it didn't bring in this responder, and so, okay, let me go in and figure out, what did you start with? He's been very good about communicating any issues because we're still kind of debugging it. So there's 2 techs that have been using it. There's another tech that's supposed to start on Friday. And I think their idea is that they're going to give it to him. He's probably going to have like a big, oh my gosh, you should change this and this and this. We'll make some more tweaks to the app potentially, or they will beat him in the submission and they will just start rolling this out. They're just trying to make it as user-friendly as possible for the techs that they know might have issues with it. So, but so far it has been going well. I don't know what else is left. This might be the last one. Yeah, that was the last one. So that was it for my presentation. Thank you.
iPads that they've issued to these guys, cellular as well. So they have the option.
Yes.
They're all cellular.
Yeah, they're supposed to be cellular. I don't know how many they actually have. So, like I said, they have the 3 that's supposed to go out. When I talked to my main contact the last couple times, he had said that the iPads were messed up. So like the guy that I said, every time he went outside or he was trying to sync, it would give him problems. I think that iPad was just messed up. So yeah, so I see Stephen has a hand.
Yes, Teresa, that was quite impressive, both the execution of it and the underlying planning that went into the needs analysis process, which is something that a number of instances of falling short have created problems in the developer community. I would suggest 2 things. First, if we ever have a DevCon again, and I hope we do, please be sure to submit this as a program. And secondly, we need to get you in touch with Marie Normand, because this thing has client customer success story written all over it.
Okay.
That needs to be done, and I'll defer to Mr. Weller, who is the partner in residence there, about doing that. But if I can help, let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Did you factor in for color blindness?
I did not, but
Not in this solution, so we did ask them that right at the front, and they said, not an issue, don't worry about it.
Well, because on the one icon, you said that it changed colors based off of whether it
The
was
status.
completed or not, yeah, the status. Yeah.
Right, well, and everything, I have a bad habit of using red and green for everything, and I know that's the leading, color blindness colors. So yeah, we should
Yeah,
have
this-
a backup
This solution
plan for that.
doesn't do that, but
One of the things
we have
that
another one that does, that we're designing specifically for somebody that's got a client. And
what I started to do was, instead of like a symbol because as a graphic designer, I'm going to use symbols for everything. Using capital letters. So that indicated whether it was completed.
Mhm.
One thing I wanted to ask is there the possibility to put audio files in there, like talk into the app itself?
To store audio, or just for them to write their notes out?
Write their notes in.
Yeah, because if you're in a text field, you can use, there's a microphone button, and
Okay,
you can just talk right into it and it'll transcribe it.
cool. And then is there ability to embed videos into this?
I mean, there could be.
The only reason I say that is, say you're demoing a product
Mhm.
and you just want to show them the video.
Oh,
rather than-
to have it like linked to the equipment so that you could say, oh, here's a little bit of a
that's
how-to.
really practical.
That's a really good idea.
They haven't brought that up, but I bet they will like that idea.
Yeah, because if they have, they'll make them if they don't have access. to
Yeah.
this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good idea.
And then the other thing was, you talked about having the products as a part of that record.
Mhm.
Does that also link to, say, their inventory database so that they can cross-reference that information?
So, and when you say product, you mean like the stock
Right.
that they're dealing with. So that is a piece that we're working with. So they manage their stock. They add stock to a contract. That contract flows is related to the service call. So that's where we're getting the inventory that they need to pull. And that is already on the back end in Stella, like in the stock history, it's been removed from stock, the location's changed, all that kind of stuff. Now, there is a little bit of a human element where if they change the location of something and don't actually move it, you know, sometimes that stuff happens. When the data comes back in to Stella, it doesn't yet change the stock status. So we already had it programmed in so that when they're on the service call, they can open up the contract and make any change, do a change out on the contract. So in the meantime, I said to them, you know, while we're working on that, you guys just keep doing what you're doing because I know you want to get moving on this. So they are currently happy with, they can hit the button, it updates all the client information, updates service call to say that it's been completed and drops in the resolution information. And if it was rescheduled, it'll change, you know, rescheduled why, how many times, it'll add one to it. And then the equipment piece, we're still working to have it automatically update the equipment on the contract.
It doesn't trigger then to go into like billing so that they can then bill for that service.
The billing is already not pre-done, but when they add the equipment to the contract, it already sets up like there's a contract line item and then there's a related subscription billing line item. They're separate because there's an install date for the equipment, and then there might be a separate billing start date and billing end date. So so the stuff's all there, and it's just a matter. Sometimes it takes them a month to install something because they can't get a hold of somebody to schedule the install, or somebody keeps canceling. So they might have the equipment on the contract with no install date, and then you know, so that's all laying there waiting for them to complete it once the service call is done.
And does it create a receipt for that interaction?
They have, well, there's a contract that can be generated right there. It can be emailed. So in the contract, that signature page, there was an email contract on the bottom. I don't think anybody's used that yet, but it's in there. It grabs, they have the layouts that they have in Big Stella for with the contract terms, their legalese terms, and then the sheet on the back that has the equipment information and their signature and the name that was just gathered. It will email it to them, but like I said, I don't think anyone's been using that. I'm not sure. I should ask them. I should tell them to try it.
Well, and it'll only work if they have a connection at the time they hit the button.
Right. So
Do they take payments? The technicians?
they don't. I don't think. Oh, maybe they do. Because they do have do it install. It depends on who the payer is. Because they work through insurance companies as well as with private pay people. So if they have a private pay, they may take payment on installation. So
This does process through different online insurance agents.
right.
But there may be some co-pays associated with this. That
Right. Well, if there's payment that goes through the insurance, that'll all get dealt with when the billing automatically generates from Big Stella.
Question, because I've not done a lot with it, but the FileMaker Data API, was that the first thing you tried for syncing the data, or had you done like a more traditional perform script on server kind of thing and then moved to the Data API?
I did the FileMaker Data API first because I wanted to use it, because I think this was the first time that I'd used the Data
Okay.
API. Previously, how we've done the syncing is we did do PSOS for that KLMs.
well, the product you developed for the home
Inspection.
inspections, similar kind of configuration, correct?
Yeah, a lot of similarities. The one thing I would say, it sounds like you're putting all of your user accounts in the file that gets stored in the container and then pushing that file out. Or
No, the container doesn't have any account information in it.
So the mobile file
Mhm.
that you have in the container that you download and push out to the technicians.
Mhm.
So there's no username or password to log into that? on the iPad?
It has a, like an SM Tech,
Mhm.
like SM Tech, it auto opens with that account.
But it has a text ID associated with that.
That's the only ID that's in there in the settings. Yeah.
And then
Because it creates a file specific for that tech with their ID.
Yeah, it drops it in, it pulls that out of that data file that it builds, and then drops that into the settings, commits, emails the file, emails
Yeah.
that file out.
and
Sorry, go ahead.
the unique identifier is the client ID, the secondary ID that's associated with that. So you have the text, but you also have the client ID.
Yeah, that's all stored in Big Stella. So what the app does when it asks for the DTR is, so it says, hey, it's, what's today? December 7th. It's December 7th, and I'm Matt, right? Do you have any DTRs for me? And it says, yes, I do. And they will pull down the DTR information. One of the fields in the DTR is a list of all of the service call IDs, the mobile service call IDs. So then it pulls that down and loops through those to pull down the individual service calls. Inside the service call is where we have the data. Like, so you'll have ID data. I don't think we have resident IDs in there. The only ID that gets pulled down into it is, must have resident. Yeah, because it has to use that to update the record later. So we have the resident ID is in there, and there's a responder ID. Responder IDs are in there in case they need to be removed. But there's an ID for the contract and probably for the contract line items. So.
Back to the setup thing quickly, the difference that I did in my security layer for the iPad app. The app is the same app everybody downloads. And everybody, the first time they install it, the username is set up and the password is new.
Okay.
And then it takes them to a screen. What is your username and password for the hosted file?
Sure.
And you hit, validate, and it calls a script in the home file. And if it can get into the home file because it was correct credentials, then it creates an account on the iPad with those credentials, and then deletes the setup account.
Okay.
So that now that iPad is specific to that.
So when they
technician.
make, when they make changes, it'll actually have
It
their.
has the technician's ID and everything already in the file. So, you can change. No, you can change is not the right phrase. So once you go through the setup, then you can only log in as that technician on that iPad.
Right.
Oh, one other thing, just a tip. You may not have had any issues in syncing, but over the years, there have been times when syncing failed for whatever reason. I do make my sync script create a backup of the file on the iPad before the sync, so that if anything happens and it doesn't sync properly, and that file gets damaged, because every once in a while a file will get damaged on the iPad, then the backup file has the data. So then you can just grab that and manually sync it or whatever, or rename it and sync it again. So yeah, I would recommend creating a backup file.
Okay.
But then you either have to teach your techs how to delete all their backups,
Right.
because it's basically file name timestamp
Right.
kind of thing.
Well, right. Yeah. I guess if it's an emergency backup, though, you could also put that as part of the script, the sync script. That if it, so here's the backup name, generate the backup.
Right.
If you get all the way to the end of the sync script, it will auto delete the backup file.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, you'll have two files there, and then you won't have to really wonder why. So yeah,
but it does happen that the iPad file will somehow get corrupted. It'll be, you have to recover this database kind of thing.
Yeah.
It does. Can't tell you why, but
That happens a lot with us, particularly with 2 to 3 gigabyte file, anyway, from like anything
Yeah.
over a gigabyte.
the bigger you get, the more.
There's
Yeah.
lots of photos.
These
and
files
data.
are never gonna get that.
Yeah.
I mean, unless someone sits there and goes on a photo shoot of like an equipment
Uh-huh.
install and they
Yeah,
take
I mean, these are like
100
home
photos.
inspections where you're taking
Yeah.
300 photos and they're all high-res photos.
Right, yeah, so I think, so ours is a little more controlled, and I preset the quality
Mhm.
of the images to be smaller.
Mhm.
To just to, again, not have that, because I don't even want a tech to be sitting at home on Wi-Fi waiting for the images to upload.
Right,
Yeah, these are loose reference things.
Yeah, they don't need
You
to
can see
be.
a door with a tag on it.
Exactly,
But
yeah.
yeah, but still the backup is a very.
Yeah, that's a good
extremely
idea.
practical.
yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Nice.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, any other questions before we move on to see if anybody has one more thing? Does
Very
anybody have another question for Teresa?
Oh, Jerry's talking. I hear his lip, or I see his lips moving, but I don't hear his voice.
So could you explain that then? Yeah, okay, so my question is, why did you use a web viewer for the note? Just because it looked better? At the very beginning,
Because notes can be long, and if the field that the notes are in is not big enough and you don't have it editable, you can't see the rest of it. So that's really the only way to see the full contents of a note is by using a web viewer.
Unless you
without
do
making
the
it
old
editable.
trick of having a display version of the field where it's a
Yeah.
calculation field so
Right.
that you can click in and scroll.
And then you potentially have errors
Which is
coming up.
all
Your
kinds of
messages would
craziness,
lock,
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
because the web viewer also, you copy and paste bits of it if you're gonna move it over to an email or something like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of practicality for displaying through it.
Mhm.
nice, okay. That's a cool idea.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else for Teresa?
Good job.
Yeah.
you.
Good job.
Thank you, very nice.
Thank you.
So we'll go ahead and move into the wrap-up portion of our meeting tonight, and we'll go over some announcement here. The first announcement here is that Claris FileMaker 19.6 is now available. Some of the new features to spotlight here are that it adds transaction script steps so that you can open, commit, and revert transactions. Adds support for Mac OS Ventura. Adds several new functions and renames the get last error detail function. And then there's also a number of improvements and enhancements and known issues that were addressed. You can visit the Claris support site for more information and get all the release notes. Right, so our second announcement is that Claris Studio has also received some updates recently, back in December 15th. You got an updated list view, updated Kanban, bubble chart is now part of the chart object, and we've got some updates in the spreadsheet view. For all of the details, you can visit the Claris Studio Help Center and get what you need there. Okay, third announcement is just a little shameless self-promotion. Cross IT is going to be serving another Lunch and Learn here in mid-January. You can tune in as Todd talks about some of those new features that have been added to Claris Studio over the last few months. It'll be January 18th, beginning at noon, go about 30 minutes. So there's the link, and remember, you always have the option to ask a question or suggest a topic that we cover during a Lunch and Learn by visiting our website there. And our final announcement is that you can find FMburgh as a group on LinkedIn. We also have a Slack channel to help keep the conversation going between meetings. They are members-only groups, so if you'd like to be part of it, please email Todd at crossit.com so he can get you added. So that takes care of the announcements. Let's move on to our survey results. Last time we talked about external dependencies. So the first question was, of the external dependencies that were discussed during the roundtable, which ones have you included in a Claris FileMaker solution? People are supposed to check all that apply, and it's not really any surprise that pretty much everybody has used plugins at some point. Also, we've got some dependencies based on the infrastructure. And then you can see there's a few others in there as well. All right, then our second question was, which reason or argument do you consider the most compelling when deciding to use an external resource and introduce a dependency into your Claris FileMaker solution? Because sometimes there's just no way around it. You have to introduce one, but what's the best reason why? So this one here was kind of split between two choices, one being platform limitations, and the second being that the external resource solves a complex problem easily compared to what you're able to do in FileMaker. And I'm happy to report that nobody introduces a dependency into their FileMaker solutions just because they can. And our final question was, which Hogwarts house best describes your values? So it was pretty evenly split, but as you can see, no one said they were from Slytherin. So I think that's pretty good to know that we don't have any dark wizards amongst the FileMaker developer community. Okay, now for some important dates. Our next meeting would normally be scheduled for the first Wednesday of February, but we are going to be moving it because of a scheduling conflict. So it'll actually be the last Wednesday of January on January 25th. So please make note of that. They've already scheduled the Pause on Error summer camp for 2023. And that is going to be October 3rd through the 6th, and they're going to be back in Clayton, Georgia, as we were the last couple of years. And the last important date is the Pale Blue Eye is available now for streaming on Netflix beginning January 6th. I only point that out because much of the movie was filmed in and around Western Pennsylvania. So pretty cool, right? All right. As noted, our next meeting is Wednesday, January 25th, starting at 7 o'clock p.m. It's going to be a roundtable discussion, and it's going to be a year in review, a year in preview discussion, where we're going to look back at things that were done this past year, but then also look ahead to the coming year as far as skills we want to learn, things that are probably coming in the platform, and just get ourselves set up for a great 2023. We certainly hope you can join us. All right, so that brings us to the end. Again, I just want to say thank you to Teresa for a great presentation. Certainly enjoyed it. Also, thank you to everyone that joined us, whether you were here in person or joined us online. And finally, just another thank you and shout out to Profile developers for use of their Zoom meeting space. So have a great time, have a great month, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.